Hey everybody, this is Blake with ChannelAndroid.com. Today I wanted to take a quick moment to do a video comparison of the Motorola Xoom and the Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1. Now first off, obviously these devices are very similar. They have the same screen resolution at 1280 by 800. They're both using a 10.1 inch screen. They both have a front and back camera, and they're both running Android Honeycomb 3.1. Now, as we look at both, I'll go ahead and say that I personally feel like both devices have their positives and their negatives. Now, first off, if you've read anything about these devices, you already know that the Galaxy Tab is a much sleeker device. If you can see it, I've tried to position the camera at an angle where you can see the difference in the thickness. Now, if you actually read the specs on these two devices, you'll see that you're looking at 0.2 of an inch difference in actual thickness. But when you lay them down on a table like this, you can really get a clear example, and the video may not do it justice, but the Galaxy Tab, much thinner than the Motorola Xoom. It doesn't feel anywhere near as clunky. If you look at them side by side, it's like I said, I'm not sure how good this is going to come across on the video, but the Galaxy Tab has a much brighter and more vibrant screen. I have the brightness turned up to as bright as it will go on both of these screens, and the Galaxy Tab has a much brighter, higher quality screen. Let's pull that zoom up again. You can really see it with them side by side, and even if you look at the icons on the Galaxy Tab seem to be much more defined, even though they're using the same resolution. And that's one area that Samsung definitely has Motorola beat. Now, like I said, the thickness is pretty different on both of these, but I'm afraid that just saying 0.2 of an inch difference doesn't really do it justice. It doesn't really let you know how it feels in the hand. There's a side shot of the two of them. Try and give you a comparison. Now the Galaxy Tab, it is just a little bit wider and a little bit taller than the Xoom. You can see from this angle, but that is not necessarily a detriment, because if you look at the front of both devices, you'll see, if you look at the bezel area here and then compare it to the bezel area on the Galaxy Tab, you'll see that both on the top, bottom, well, and on both sides, the Galaxy Tab has more bezel. And while bezel is not necessarily something you love to look at, it's necessary, especially in a device that you're going to be holding like this, and you're going to need thumb room. Now, after using the Xoom for a while, I got accustomed to it, and I didn't think the bezel was that big of an issue. I kind of got used to it, but when you add in the fact that it's heavier and it does have less bezel, it's not as comfortable to hold this in your hand as it is to hold the Galaxy Tab. Now, what else is different about these tabs? The Xoom has SD card. Now, Motorola still has not released an official update to take care of the SD card thing, so unless you're willing to go the root route, you're not going to be using an SD card. But it is there. There is no SD card slot on the Galaxy Tab. If we look at the ports on the bottom, the Motorola has 3 ports on the bottom. First, you have a micro USB, the micro HDMI, and then the proprietary connector for charging. You can't actually charge the Xoom with a USB port. whereas on the Galaxy Tab there's just one port. It is a proprietary Samsung 30-pin port. I personally prefer the micro USB support on the Xoom. It will make it easier to get a device or to get a cable from anywhere online and throw it in there, especially now that we've got the USB host support built into Honeycomb. So that's one area, along with the SD card, that I think the Xoom beats out the Galaxy Tab. Now if we look at the cameras, both of these cameras are pretty bad. So they both actually have a 2 megapixel front camera, and the Xoom has a 5 megapixel back camera, while the Galaxy Tab has a 3 megapixel back camera. But I don't think you're going to be taking many pictures with these, regardless of the resolution, because they are not very good. Also, if you look at the button layout on both of these devices, you'll see on the Galaxy Tab you have the power button up top and then a volume rocker. It's pretty nice positioning. Then on the Xoom you have the power button on the back, like so, which is a little confusing at first, but once you've spent some time with it, it actually gets to where it's kind of nice, because it's right here where this left index finger, if you're holding it in widescreen mode, is able to just click on it real quick. I'm not a big fan of the volume keys on the Xoom. As you can see, they're not very big, they're a little recessed, and sometimes when you go to hit it, I'm not having problems now, but I have to make an effort to make sure I use my fingernail and not the finger, because the button is so small and recessed. As far as the software goes, these devices are virtually the same. I have noticed some small differences. There is a Samsung keyboard on this device, whereas the Motorola device has the Android keyboard for Honeycomb. The keyboard for the Xoom has some clicking sounds when you're typing, and the Galaxy Tab keyboard actually has the haptic feedback that we've gotten used to on a lot of devices, which is pretty nice. Also, on the Galaxy Tab, there is a setting that is built in to allow us, when we set the wallpaper, to choose if we want to set the wallpaper on the lock screen or the home screen. And this is not something that we have on the Xoom. It just sets it to both. So let's get out of that. Now, as far as using the devices goes, they feel pretty comparable. I think that I definitely like using the Galaxy Tab better. It feels like, after some time spent with it, that it feels a little bit more fluid at times. However, when I did take an opportunity to play a pretty graphic intensive game, I actually found that it seemed to run smoother on the Xoom than it did on the Galaxy Tab. But it's not a truly fair comparison, because I am running a custom kernel on this, and I did have it overclocked. So that's not the best comparison in the world. Real quick, I want to run Quadrant on both devices and see if we can get a comparison on what they're scoring. Now, like I said, the Xoom is running a custom kernel at the moment, and I may even still have it overclocked, so don't be surprised if it does score higher. But we'll run them both real quick and see how it actually turns out. Now, I may or may not have just talked about the weight of these devices. The Galaxy Tab is a little bit lighter than the Xoom. It weighs just shy of 21 ounces, whereas the Xoom is 25.75. So it's 20.99 versus 25.75. And that doesn't sound like a whole lot. You're talking about, that is 4.25 ounces or 4 3/4 ounces. That's not a great deal of weight, but it is definitely substantial, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of reading on the devices, which is how I like to use the device. So okay, we have 1732 scoring on my Xoom and 1551 scoring on the Galaxy Tab. So that's a little bit of a rundown. I don't know if I covered everything I thought I would get to, but I think that's a pretty good overview for those of you out there. I think that if you're choosing between either of these devices, they're both really good devices. I prefer the Galaxy Tab, as I think most people will, but there's definitely some positives and some negatives to each. And right now, if you want to get a Xoom, there's a lot of good accessories out there to go along with it. I've got the dock, I've used the folio case, and I can't remember, I've got something else. Either way, the keyboard. And the selection for the accessories for the Galaxy Tab is a little sparse at the moment. So hopefully they'll catch up. So there you go. Make your choice. Hopefully this will help you